This is Gemara in Gittin Daf Yomi, and we're holding on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amid Beis, approximately 8 lines from the bottom. The first one line is a Mai. And we just finished saying how we're not concerned for every single scenario in Get. Says the Gemara, what is the story regarding Abaya Kasa by Shavua Shana Chaydesh Shabbos? Let's say in the get, they didn't write the precise date, continuing the discussion of the reason we have a get, a date and a get, and the ensuing dinim. So you didn't write a precise date, you wrote it was during this week, it was during this year, this month, or this Shabbos, this 7-year Shemitah cycle. What's the din? Amrli kosher. It's kosher. Says the Gemara, Shkayach. If this is going to be kosher, what's the point of writing a date? What did you gain? You gain that you know the get was given within the last 7 years? Answers the Gemara, no, you did gain. You know that it was within these 7 years, so if something was sold before these 7 years, then it would not be included. A very big chiddush. Says the Gemara, I'll bring you a raya. If you don't agree, even the date itself, do you know what date it is? No, you don't really know what date it is. Why do you not really know what date it is? Because maybe it was in the morning, maybe it's in the afternoon. So rather, what does it help? It must help that you know it wasn't yesterday or tomorrow. Obviously, everyone is wondering that there's a very large difference between today, tomorrow, and the 7-year time period, but that's the chiddush of the Gemara. Continues the Gemara on the last line of Yitzayin Beis. Amar le Ravina leRava. Says Ravina to Rava. Kasvei, in the case of someone who wrote a get, as we turn over to Yud Chesam and Aleph, v'oisvei b'kisisei. He writes a get, and instead of giving the get to his wife, he puts it in his back pocket, or his front pocket for that matter. And he says, as Rashi says, he's going to hold on to it just in case he decides he wants to divorce his wife. An interesting fellow. So what's the din? Dima faisa tivayis. He figures if we get back together, if we settle our disputes, then great. And if not, then I'll divorce her then. So what's the din? The whole reason writing a get in the zaman of the get is to know when this get was written. But if you're just going to hold on to it, what is the story? Says the Gemara, Amar le lo maktivinish lepranish lemasei. Doesn't really answer the question. He just says that a person doesn't do this. Another case. A get's written overseas. It's written in Nisan. It doesn't reach Bezdin until 6 months later. Again, what does it help writing the get? We don't know about this get till many months later. Whenever you bring a get overseas, there's a call. Everyone knows about it, and therefore what? Therefore, you're going to go look into it to ensure when the precise get, zman, time on the get was. Itmar, continues the Gemara. Me'imasai moinin leget. When do we count literally for a get? And we'll see what this means in a moment. Rav Amar Mishas Nesina, Ushmul Amar Mishas Ksiva. Rav says, when you count for the get, what are we talking about counting? Rashi fills in the missing words. The 3 months that a woman has to wait after getting divorced before she gets remarried, just in case she is pregnant with a child. We'll know who the father of the child is. Machlek is Rav and Shmuel, whether you wait the 3 months from the time the get was given or from the time the get was written, says Shmuel. So Maskler Rav Nosson Bar Shmuel. So they ask Shmuel the following question. Yom Rushtei Nashim B'Chatzar Achas. You know what's going to come out? You can have 2 women, 2 wives. They're both in one chutzner, and the husband divorced both of them. But the dates were written differently. And what's going to come out? Zu asura v'zu mutares. What's going to come out that according to Shmuel, as Rashi spells out the case, one can get married 2 months later if the guy was written a month earlier, and one's going to have to be married 3 months later, and people are going to wonder what in the world is going on over here. We know these 2 women got divorced on the same day, they both received their get on the same day, and yet what's happening is they're getting remarried at different times. Amar le Abaya says, Abaya, that's not shver. Each one has a zman in their get, and that zman proves what the story is. So we thought we had a kasha in Shmuel. Shmuel defense. Tani kavasei derav. Tani devasei the Shmuel right to Rav that we start counting the 3 months at the time of the ksiva, the writing of the get, right to Shmuel that we start from the time of the giving a get. Tani kavasei derav. Says the Gemara, Shliach el Ishto, someone sends a get to his wife. Finished. Shliach badar gimel chadashim, and the shliach waits on the road for 3 months. Takes 3 months to give the get to the wife. Kshia geli yada. Once she gets the get, you have to wait 3 months. So what do we see? We see, excuse me, we see, I think I said the names wrong before. We see that the 3 months are going for the time the get is given. Even though this get was written 3 months prior, when does she wait her 3 months for? From when she received the get, a raya to Rav, that it goes to the time of the Nisina. Now the Gemara points out, get Yashin and Chayshim, why are we now worried about a get Yashin? What's a get Yashin? A get Yashin is any time the Zman on the get is early. The reason is, the fact that they were not Nisyache, they were not together, there's no issue with a get yashin. As Rashi points out, that the whole problem with an old get is if husband and wife are nisyachid, go into seclusion between the time of the writing and the giving of the get. So that's the raya to Rav, that it goes to the time of the giving of the get. Tani Kavasi to Shmuel. Says the Gemara, now I'll tell you a raya to Shmuel, that it goes to the time of the writing of the get. Hamashlish, says the case. Gal Ishtai, someone gives the get to his wife via a third party. Va'amar lahi, al titneihu la, do not give it to her. Elalachar gimel chadashim. Wait 3 months before you give the get to her. Mishanasun la, once he gives it to her, mutares linase miyad. She get married right away. So what do we see? Even though you're only getting the get today, because it was written 3 months prior, she's got to get remarried right away. Clearly, we're going for the time of the ksiva. And as well, the Gemara fills in the missing words. The Gemara wraps up this portion of the Shir, teaching us different Amarayim, what their practice was. Says the Gemara, Rav Kahana, Rav Papi, Rav Ashi, Avdi Mishas Ksiva like Shmuel. Rav Papi, Rav Unabred, Rav Yeshua, Avdi Mishas Nesina like Rav. V'Hilchasa concludes this portion of the Gemara, Mishas Ksiva L'Maiser Paski like Shmuel, that it goes to the time of the writing of the get. Says the Gemara, Itmar. We're about 20 lines on the bottom. First word of the line is Ksiva. Itmar, says the Gemara, means like Ksuva Mishametes. So now, once we're talking about Zaman, once we're talking about the time inside a document, we go into Ksuba and ask the Gemara an interesting question. A Ksuba is a monetary document that a husband is obligated to pay his wife X amount. So at what point does Shemitah cancel the debt in a Ksuba? An interesting question, which as we'll see will be fine-tuned from the Gemara. Rav Amar Misha Tibkoim V'Tizkoif. Once he pays up a little bit, that's Tifkoim. V'Tizkoif, once he says that the remainder that I did not pay you yet should be a halva, should be a loan. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Pagma aval bishlai zakfa, zakfa aval bishlai pagma. If either the husband paid up a little bit, or they made the rest of the ksuba as a loan, then Shemitah cancels this debt. And now we can understand this a little better, because we know that the halacha is that Shemitah is mishamet all halvayos, all loans. So now it's very logical what the Gemara is saying. According to Rav, the moment you make it into a loan. According to Shmuel, together with paying a little bit. According to Shmuel, if you either paid a little bit, as Rashi says, then it's considered that you're coming to collect the rest, lo yigois, or when you made it into a halva. Again, it's similar, mimicking the previous Gemara, says the Gemara. Now, Tani Kavasei de Rav, Tani Kavasei de Shmuel. Tani Kavasei de Rav, that it's time that you paid and the time that you made a halva. As the Bryce says, Meim is like Sumishametes, Misha Tivkoim Vitizkoif. Once you paid and made into halva. Pagma v'lei zakva, zakva v'lei pagma. Ina mishamet is ad. The Bryce says explicitly. Shetikva v'tizkaif. Explicit raya to Rav. Tani kvazei de Shmuel. Oines ukinas upitoi. All the things that a man has to pay a woman if either he seduces her or he forces her to have relationships. Uksubas isha, and the payments of the ksuba, says the Brisa, shezakfan be'milva mishamtin. That once they are made into a halva, at that moment, then it is mishamet, even without paying at all. Vim lav, ein mishamtin. And if not, then it's not mishamet. Says the Gemara, me'emasai nizkafim b'milva. At what point is it considered made into a loan? Mishas hamadz bedin, at the time that they come to Bezdin to start the collection, the payment of the ksuba, or any of these other dinim, that's the time that's considered that it's made into a halva. That's the time that Shemitah will cancel. That is the raya to the opinion of Shmuel. Says the Gemara, once we're on the opinion, Amar Shmuel, Ksuba is Kemaisa Bezdin. What is the din of a Ksuba? Ksuba is the din of a Maisa Bezdin. What does it mean as the din of a Maisa Bezdin, Dami? So the Gemara now is going to explain, then we'll see a Rashi. Says the Gemara, Ma Maisa Bezdin Nechtav B'yom Nechtav Min Balayla. Just like a Bezdin, an act of court. The rule is, Bezdin is allowed to write something on one date, and the Bezdin signs it at night, which would be a little bit weird, because as we've mentioned in the previous shurim, night and day in halacha start at night and go to day. So today is the different date than tonight. So if I write something today, tonight is called a different date on the star. Yet a Maisa Bezdin is allowed to be written today and signed tonight. So too, Aviksuba Nechteves B'Yom is allowed to be written by day, V'Nechtemes Ba'Layla, and signed at night. Rashi speaks out, the reason is because of Psak Din. When Bezdin writes down and records who is obligated, who has to pay, etc., the halacha is the mere transcribing of the court, that is what obligates you. The signatures are almost like a cherry on top, which are not the obligating factor. And because of that, says the Gemara, that's why it can be signed at a different date. Says the Gemara, similarly, when it comes to the Ksuba, it is the writing of the Ksuba. Rashi points out it's the kiru of chasanois. That's what creates the shiba. That's what creates that the husband is obligating him to his wife, even without the signatures. And therefore, even if it's going to be signed at a different date, we do not have to be concerned. Continues the Gemara, Ksuba Seder Rav Chia bar Rabba, a bunch of stories. Echtam Yom V'Nechtam, Balayla was written by day and signed by night. Have Rav, some Rav is over there. Like we just said, Rav didn't comment. A Ksuba is allowed to be written by day and signed by night. Says the Gemara, Lema Kishmuel, Svirle does Rav hold like Shmuel, and that's the reason why he was okay with it being written by day and signed at night? Says the Gemara, no. Asukim Baisa Inyan Avai. They were dealing with the matter. And Allah is the Tanya Rav Elazar Rav Sadik Loishanu Al-Kshein Asukim Baisa Inyan. Allah is only if they're not dealing, even a regular shtar, a regular document. The only time it has to be written and signed the same day is if they're not dealing with the Inyan the whole time. Aval Asukim Baisa Inyan, but if they're dealing with the Inyan the whole time, then it's kosher even if it is written by day and signed at night. So this would work even not with the opinion of Shmuel. Continues the Gemara, Rav Shimon Machshir. The end of the Mishnah, we quote the opinion of Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon says that what's the din? Rav Shimon says that even a get that is a mukdam as an early date, it's kosher. Amar Rava, my time with Rav Shimon. Hopefully it should sound familiar as Rashi quoted this Gemara yesterday. Why does Rav Shimon hold that predated shar is kosher? Because Savri holds, Kiv Chas Ein Legarsha, Shov Ein Loi Peiros. Rav Shimon holds that what was the whole reason we wrote the Zman, the date in the shtar, the date in the get, was to make sure that the collection of the Peiros is from the right date and the husband can't sell the wife's Nechsei Malog. But Rav Shimon holds, once you put your eyes to divorce her, from that moment you don't get Peiros, therefore it doesn't make a difference if the get was predated. Says the Gemara, Amar Reish Lakish L'Ichsha Rav Shimon Ela Le'alter. This din of Rav Shimon that a predated get is kosher is only if it's Le'alter. Is if it's signed right away, meaning it was written today and it's signed tonight. It's predated, but it's within a short amount of time, we'll call it. But if it's predated for 10 days, says the Gemara, then Rav Shimon agrees that it's going to be a problem. Why is that going to be a problem as we turn over to Yurches Amid Beis? Says the Gemara, because Chayshinon Shema Pies. If there's a large interval between the writing and the giving of the writing and the signing of the get, then we have to be worried that there was the husband and wife made up between each other, and maybe they were secluded together, maybe they had relations between the time of the writing and the time of the giving of the get, which creates a situation of a get yashin, and therefore that will pass all the get. So says the Gemara, because of that concern, that is the reason why after 10 days we have to be worried, even according to Shmuel. For Rav Yochanan Amar, no, I feel mikan vadasar yomim, even after 10 days. And he said the bai is kala isla. If they actually got back together, everyone would know about it. Rashi says, because all the neighbors know that the husband and wife have been fighting incessantly, and now they're going to hear that Lamais there's no more fighting, so they're going to know that they made up, and therefore we don't have to be worried that this predated shtar, even with 10 days, is potentially that the husband and wife were together. Continues the Gemara, Itmar. A bit of a new topic, a topic that we're going to come back to towards the end of the Masechta. Omar la'asara kisu gel ishti. If someone told 10 people, write a get for my wife, what is the halacha? Omar Rav Yochanan teaches Rav Yochanan 4 lines down, Yechazim Beis, Shnayim misham edim, v'kulim misham tanai. Says Rav Yochanan, they all have to sign this get, but 2 are signing as edim, and the others are signing as a tanai. It's a condition that the husband made that they all have to be involved in the get. Reish Lakish Amar, no. Kula misham eidim, the husband, by telling them all to write and sign the get, they all are eidim, they all have to sign the get as eidim. Says the Gemara, Hechi Dami, what's going on over here? If he did not say to them kulchem, meaning he just said you all should write the get. Vatanan, we're going to learn in Daf Samach Vav. Amar lasar kisfu gele ishti. If he just said to them, people write it, didn't specify all of them. The halacha is echad kaisev ushnayim chayis min. 1 writes it and 2 sign it. So that can't be the case because we just said they all have to sign it. Ella, what must the case be? The Amarlu Kulchem, he said you all should write it. So says the Gemara, if they all were told to write it, sign it, and they all have to sign it, why do I care if they're all signing it as a Tanai or they're all signing it as Edim? Seemingly it's the same thing. Answers the Gemara, there is a fundamental difference. Ike Beinayu, says the Gemara, the Chosum Beitrei Minayu Biyoimei. 2 signed on one day. The Inoch and the other 8, Mikan Vadasar Yom, they signed afterwards. So if the reason the other 8 people have to sign is just a condition in the get, kosher. It's going to be kosher even though it was signed at a later date. According to Mandamar that says that they're all signing as the Eidim, then it will be possible if it's on a different date. Teretz number 1. Teretz number 2 says the Gemara Inami. We're practicing 10 lines to the bottom. First one in line is Inami. Says the Gemara Inami. Another case of difference is one of these 10 is a relative or apostle for Eidos. If the other 8 are just an extra condition, kosher, then the fact that they're found to be puzzle Eidos, it's fine. But that they're all Eidim puzzle, then it's going to be puzzle. So now, clarifies the Gemara. But what if the first 2 Eidim that signed were a Karav or apostle? So now what? We were just discussing that the additional Eidim are either a Tanai or Eidim themselves. What about the actual first 2 Eidim? So Amri la kosher, Amri la apostle. Amri la kosher. Some say it's kosher. Why? Tanaihu. It is a condition, and therefore the fact that the first 2 are apostle, who cares? Different reason. You can come to mistake this with other cases of confirming Eidos, which of course would not work with a Karav or a apostle. We wrap up the day with a story. 3 lines to the bottom. Someone told 10 people, Kisu get, Elishti, ready to get from my wife. Chasam Bei Trei Minayu, 2 signed on that day, and the rest signed afterwards. So also like I made Rav Yeshua ben Levi. They came to Rav Yeshua ben Levi, and Amar Le, Rav Yeshua ben Levi says the famous words. As we turn over to Yetesam and Aleph, what did Rav Yeshua ben Levi tell them? Kedayu Rav Shimon lismach alav b'shas adchak. K'visemech Rav Shimon. What was the din of Rav Shimon? It's the din that we're discussing, that a predated shtar is kosher. Says the Gemara, you can be semech on Rav Shimon b'shas adchak. Therefore, even though it was signed days afterwards, it's still going to be okay. Says the Gemara, 1 second. V'amar Reish Lakish. What about the fact that Reish Lakish taught us that lo yichshar Rav Shimon el la'alter avol mikan v'adasar yamim loy? What do you mean? We learned that Rav Shimon is only being makel right away. But if they're signed afterwards, 10 days, then it's going to be a problem. In this case, it was 10 days later. Says the Gemara, loy. Because in this case, he holds like Rav Yochanan, who says that Rav Shimon is a mekel even after 10 days. Ask the Gemara 1 second, but Rav Yochanan says that they're all just a Tanai, so why do you even need to say this? Says Gemara, Be'ahi Karish Lakish Firle. So very Gishmak comes out that in this latter machlek is yours like Rish Lakish, and the former machlek is yours like Rav Yochanan, and therefore in this case, even though they signed many days later, it's still going to be kosher. We'll pick it up from the Mishnah in the next year, B'siyata Dishmayo.